Hello, my YouTube family. This is the OG Crypto New Jack coming at you with some juicy news. But before I begin, let me say I'm not a financial advisor. Anything you see or hear in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Remember to do your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making investment decisions. Okay, we are going to begin looking at the total crypto market cap, and it is coming in at 1.08 trillion and is up 0.4%. Coming in at number one is Bitcoin at 25,767. Coming in at number two is Ethereum at 1,637. Now, beloved XRP is coming in at number 5 at 49 cents. Taking a look at crypto bubbles, it looks like it's mostly green, and Caspa is coming in at number 1, up 16.1%. Taking a look at the Fear and Greed Index, is coming in Fear at 41. We're going to start here with Stuart Alderati, Ripple's Chief Legal Officer, and he writes, Ripple just filed its opposition to the SEC's request for an interlocutory appeal. Worth a read, in my opinion, especially footnotes. Number 5 is one of my personal favorites. And here is Paul Garal's take. He writes, nothing but facts and circumstances one day until it's all a pure question of law the next. And Stuart Alderati's team appropriately lay waste to this hypocrisy. Jeremy Hogan chimes in. He writes, Ripple starts off vicious with the Youngers case, screenshotted on the right. The case says that the issue is to be appealed must be one of pure law. And the SEC has an issue that's part bloodhound, a little chihuahua, and half mud. It's a high hurdle to jump over for the SEC. 100% agree with that. Okay, John E. Dean, he responds to Pomp's statement where he writes, regulators and entrepreneurs have to learn to work together. And John Dean writes, it sounds great to say we should work with regulators. When you have a bad faith regulator like Gary Gensler, there's no working together. Ask Jeremy Kaufman how it worked out for him in the library when he took the same approach and walked into the SEC offices and said, you don't have anything to hide, and attempted to educate the SEC about the decentralized library blockchain. Almost every professional crypto trader in the US had never heard of the LBC token. Maybe we should ask former employees of library who lost their jobs. And I have to 100% agree with that. Okay, here we have the digital asset investor. He writes, we've watched some of the biggest bad guys brought to their knees. Fun watch. Here, let me play the video.
I want to ask you a question. Do you think that the Grayscale ETF decision was bigger than the Ripple SEC decision? When I said the ETF decision versus the tokens potentially not being securities, which one in your mind was more important for the future of crypto?
Probably the Ripple.
I agree, because we had a spaces yesterday where we spoke about this, and people were saying, no, the ETF decision is big. I said, look, the ETF decision just means more money coming into the asset. The other one is a pivotal moment because it actually changes whether these things are securities or not securities, and that changes the entire future of how people build with these things, use these things.
Well, because an ETF Bitcoin, as you say, this is just flow of money, right? What the XRP Ripple case is all about is really about the future of Web3,
Agree.
Which is a much bigger concept than just cryptocurrencies. It's about the integration of blockchain technology into everything that we do in a whole bunch of different business models. And that's not clear yet, where that's going to come out, but it's coming out in favor of Web3 being the future and not everything is a bloody security, which is ludicrous.
One thing I've noticed is when things are going to the courts, Web3 is winning. So Ripple, it went to the court, Web3 won. There was another monumental ruling this year. I actually may have it here. It is the Uniswap ruling. Now, a lot of people just, they browse this and say, oh, it's a case, it's a fickle case against Uniswap, but it's actually not, because in this ruling, the judge actually acknowledged that DeFi is a decentralized protocol and you can't hold the developers liable for how people use the protocol. And they also acknowledged that DeFi is just a piece of code, which is, that is a massive ruling. The third big ruling we had was Grayscale versus the SEC, where Grayscale said, look, where the judge said, hold on a second, you can't treat the futures ETF different from the spot ETF, because essentially they both rely on the price of the spot asset. So I think that when things are going to the courts, we're getting some fantastic outcomes, and Web3 is actually winning.
Just what I think the SEC misunderstood here was how smart this space is. It is the smartest collection of people I've ever come across, because they are technologists, they're finance people, they're artists, they are this conglomeration of people with skill sets I have never seen in any industry before. Sure, there's smart people in AI, but they're kind of less commercial than this group of people, right? So you're going up against some of the smartest people in the world who are mission driven and who have thought about decentralized protocols. That's why it was invented, because the idea is we know that this is an answer that the courts can't deal with because it is code.
And you know what? Everybody's getting the picture. Here we go. Watcher Guru writes, Chinese court declares crypto legal property protected by law. Seems like everybody's getting it except the USA. Okay, Johnny Dean, he writes, notice that Clean says until the large institutions like BlackRock offer it, we won't allow retail access. He literally admits that's how it works in the United States. Now, of course, he couches it all in the name of investor protection, which I reject as pure BS. And I agree with that 100%. Let me play the video.
So all that said, if you were in the chair today, would you have approved it?
Well, look, I'm not there, and I'm not going to have that kind of, I do this, he would do that. What I have said is, as this has developed, it is clear that Bitcoin is not a security. It is clear that Bitcoin is something that retail investors want access to, that institutional investors want access to. And importantly, some of our most trusted providers who are fiduciaries or have duties of best interest want to provide this product to the retail public. So I think, as Anthony said, an approval isn't inevitable. The dichotomy between a futures product and a cash product can't go on forever. And so I think that's the path we're on.
So if it's inevitable, Jay, then what is the SEC deferring? Why is the SEC deferring the applications? Are they looking for other ways, other grounds in which to try and reject these applications? And what is the case to be made when there are, futures ETFs for Bitcoin that are investors safer buying a Bitcoin futures ETF than a Bitcoin cash ETF?
What I think we are finding out is that for a long time, and I held this view, let me be clear, and I held the view that we were uncertain whether cash trading was so easily manipulatable that retail folks should not have access to it. There are now large institutions with surveillance mechanisms who are coming in and saying, no, that's not the case. We can rely on the efficacy of the cash market to a sufficient extent where we believe this is an appropriate product. That's a shift. Now, the SEC has been given time by the DC Circuit to reassess and perhaps come up with other reasons. I don't see those. Maybe there will be some, but I don't see those.
So what's your assessment then of what Chair Gensler is doing? Why everybody in the industry saying it's inevitable and he's just going to look for ways to reject the applications when there's a futures ETF already on the market? What's the point here?
Well, let me say this. We'll give them time. There's a roughly 45-day time period, both in the DC Circuit and on the deferral of these applications. In the relative scheme of things, and I think Anthony was he didn't say this directly, but in the relative scheme of things, 45 days is a short amount of time. And I do expect that we'll have progress on this going forward.
Oh boy. Here we go. Jack the Rippler, he writes, look at this glitch, or is this the real price? 9,868 per XRP. You can see that over here. And I'm not sure if I'm mistaken or not, but it seems that XRP is the only token that seems to have these price switches. Well, hopefully one day we'll get there. Okay, moving on. Shout out to Actually Prosper. Right. I recall Ripple saying that the SEC agreed that XRP is not a security. There would be a settlement almost instantly. Well, the court has now declared that XRP itself is not a security, and the SEC itself conceded that XRP is not a security in its latest court filing. So what is preventing a settlement over the remaining issues? No, but that could be it. Jack the Ripple again, he writes, Ripple CTO David Schwartz says digital assets like XRP could challenge USD as the world reserve currency. Let me play.
Do you believe that there can be two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as the reserve currency. And I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever, other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks. Like people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that only like 10 banks in the country on the planet are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks, those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the US, that's grown the US economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the US holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital assets. If these countries are like, okay, well, the US dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the US dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the money question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, You know, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
That's good.
You know, it's great.
I 100% agree with that. And hopefully that comes to fruition. Okay, moving on. Bitcoin Magazine puts out, just in, El Salvador will implement Bitcoin education to every public school in 2024. You know what? That's a wonderful thing to see. I just wish here in the United States of America, we get on point, because we can't even teach our youth to balance a checkbook or teach them about money. And you have these countries that are supposedly lower on the pecking order doing this with their students. So we're pretty much falling behind in every topic and every aspect that there is as a country. Hopefully we can get our shit together. Okay, moving on. Watch a Guru. Just in, world's largest crypto casino, stake.com, reportedly hacked for 41.3 million. That's not good. And hopefully there's some people that have been saying that it could have been an inside job and they basically just stole the money. And I hope that's not the case. I hope stake.com don't turn out to be a bad actor, because it's just going to put a blemish on the entire crypto industry. So hopefully it was some hackers, and hopefully they can get caught and prosecuted. Okay, moving on. XRP captain here. We have David Schwartz, Ripple Chief Technology Officer, talking about flipping the switch. Let me play the video.
In the XRP ledger, and you can handle real money with it. You don't have to. You have a switch that you can flip whenever you're ready to handle real money. And then when you're arguing that feature should be included in the XRP ledger, you have something that you can show that.
Flip the switch. Let's flip it, Dave. Flip it. Okay, here we go. We have Ito Farina with this clip here. And he writes, former member of SWIFT joined Ripple and admitted it isn't the solution for the Internet of Value. Brad Garlinghouse, let me play the video.
I think what we're doing and executing on a day-by-day basis is in fact taking over SWIFT. In that, we've now signed up, well over 100 banks. Some of the largest SWIFT-enabled banks in the world are now using Ripple's technology. Just last week we saw a remittance company who's using Ripple's technology. They reduced the price per transaction to their consumers from $20 per transaction to $2 per transaction, and they saw an 800% increase in usage overnight. That's the type of dynamic that SWIFT isn't able to support that we're able to address right now.
One of the former board members of SWIFT, a gentleman Marcus Treacher, joined our team to run all of customer success. And this was a former board member from SWIFT coming over and saying, hey, we don't think SWIFT's going to be necessarily a solution to really unlocking this Internet of Value. These are marks along the journey.
Now SWIFT, SWIFT is kind of a competitor. It's slightly more complicated than that, because SWIFT is really just messaging. When you send a SWIFT transfer, it's not liquidity. You're actually sending bank messages to banks that have liquidity. So to some degree, Citibank and HSBC, really the top two, JPM, those are the top three liquidity banks. And when you're sending SWIFT messages, you're sending messages to banks to release liquidity and making sure the debits and credits match. So to some degree, really boil it down, Ripple's competing with the liquidity of Citi and the messaging of SWIFT, but in one, because we're both messaging and liquidity. And at the end of the day, again, as I described, SWIFT was developed 50 plus years ago. It architecturally hasn't really changed. It does remain slow, gaze. It does remain, relatively speaking, expensive. And actually, interestingly, it's quite error prone.
Exactly. XRP, the new standard. Okay. Shout out to Panos. This is a great depiction for the people who are coming in new to the space. They're not too quite familiar. XRP Ledger is a layer 1 blockchain. The XRP Ledger is a decentralized public blockchain that is open source and powered by a global developer community. Companies, institutions, developers, and individuals around the world use the XRP Ledger for use cases across tokenization, payments, stablecoins, CBDCs, and more. The XRP, the native digital asset. XRP is the native digital asset, the token of XRPL, similar to ETH for Ethereum and SOL for Solana. The primary utility of XRP is to facilitate transactions on the network. XRP also serves to protect the ledger from spam and to bridge currencies and XRP Ledger's DEX. Ripple, the crypto solutions company. Ripple is a technology company that builds crypto solutions for businesses. Ripple uses XRP as a bridge currency in its solutions because it's fast, efficient, and reliable, making it ideal for financial use cases like payments. Ripple is also a holder of XRP. Ripple is one of many developers building on and contributing to the XRP Ledger. Okay, moving on. Shout out to the digital asset investor. He puts out this old plan, Satoshi equals government perfectly disguised as a libertarian movement. Heard them in. Let me play the video.
I thought about this last night reading Pantera's monthly newsletter, which I always look forward to reading. And of course, they're starting to talk about the halving. And if you look at their model, It shows Bitcoin crossing 100,000 around about the time of the US presidential election in 2024. Okay. And I made the joke, I guess my laser eyes will have to come off right about the same time as the presidential election. Satoshi did this on purpose, folks. Satoshi aligned Bitcoin halvings and bull markets to the US presidential cycle.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. It's 6 months before every single time. And anybody who's watched any halving cycle knows it takes about 6 months for that supply reduction to really start to play into the market. It's interesting. I literally never thought about that.
Okay, moving on. Shout out to Easy. He writes the Ripple network is what, Katie? If you went and Ripple for something they did in the past, then what makes ETH different? We have the receipts. We know about the disguised whales. Watch the second video. Sounds pretty centralized to me. Let me play the videos.
It's a decentralized network, but we were looking back at the time historically, and Ripple had exercised a lot more control over its own protocol. Obviously, Ripple Labs controlled the Ripple protocol, so I don't think that there would be an analogy for a Bitcoin, for example. Well, first of all, I don't think anyone could require changes to the Bitcoin protocol given the open source nature. And one important thing to keep in mind about the Ripple settlement is that actually it's a settlement. And both sides asked for things. It was a give and take. They were represented by 3 very able law firms in the process. And Ripple actually came forward with some proposals of things that they could do to ameliorate the government's legitimate concerns. And one of the things that they suggested was exactly what you just mentioned, is changing some of the protocols. The Ripple network is a decentralized network, but we were looking back at the time historically, and Ripple had exercised a lot more control over its own protocol. Obviously, Ripple Labs controlled the Ripple protocol. So I don't think that there would be an analogy for a Bitcoin, for example.
In the next video.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know the community is going to be super excited about having you join us. So how do you describe your role within the Ethereum project or community today? What is your role?
So my role when I started was basically that I was the one who kind of came up with the initial idea. I wrote the white paper. I kind of sent it out to people, brought together the community initially.
Exactly. Okay, Locke Davis put this thing out. It's a big win today for Bitcoin accounting rules. The Financial Accounting Standards Board has voted to allow for companies to use fair value measurement. In the past, it was only at the lowest price. This means big companies like Apple will now be much more likely to buy Bitcoin. And that's all of them. Apple, Google, you name it. All the big boys, they can finally buy it. And Caitlin Long also agrees. She writes, this is real news for Bitcoin. And it's a positive sign. And that in combination with the Bitcoin spot ETF applications, Anthony Papalano says Bitcoin is poised for another 2020 bull run. And you know what? If those ETFs gets approved and everything seems to be shaping up for probably the biggest bull run in the history of crypto coming up after the next Bitcoin halving. So time will tell. Okay, shout out to Crypto Airy. She writes, on-demand liquidity, ODL with XRP expansion from SBI Japan, add Vietnam and Indonesia to remittance countries after the Philippines. And that was a very good thing to see. And with the same topic with SBI, shout out to Cypress Demonicorp for putting this thing out. Let me play the video.
Oh, we got some major information for you all today. Do you all remember back in 2022, this gentleman right here, SBI CEO, said every bank in Japan will use Ripple's XRP by 2025, right? Yoshitaka Katayo, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, still the updated CEO of SBI, and I'll show you all that in just 1 second. He also went on to say, so I think that XRP in the crypto world is probably the #1 crypto asset. Stay tuned to the end of this video, it's going to blow your mind. Well, what just recently came out on the SBI VC Trade website, this is from today, the 6th of September, 2023, sequential expansion of international remittance services using Ripple's remittance solution that utilizes XRP to the Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. It goes on to say right down here, by using XRP as a bridge currency, you can send money quickly and at a low cost. SBI Holdings and Ripple will start providing international remittance services using the crypto asset XRP. You all can even see the little diagram that they have right down here directly on their website. This is from today, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, well, check this out. Message from the top got sent from SBI Holdings CEO right down here. You guys can see his name. Okay, this is recent, and look what he freaking said. Advancement of innovative technologies has progressed all over the world in the area of fintech and in the financial industry, as well as in the fields such as AI, blockchain, DLT, and Internet of Things, which are now introduced in various industries. Hold the potential. Check this out. Check this out. Hold the potential of creating a trend that the group has never seen before. I'll pause right there and take your attention to something that this city representative said in a panel discussion from 2 months ago. Again, pay attention to detail. I've shown you all that they say the same things that the group has never seen before. Listen to the city representative.
Great opportunity for people with your skill set to help us large organizations. There's, build your own companies as well, of course, but you can really help us to get the infrastructure in place to enable, blockchain-based technologies to really grow at the scale that we haven't seen before. To really grow at the scale that we haven't seen before.
That is absolutely massive, right? And then last but not least, from the CEO of SBI Holdings, through the maximum utilization of business resources and triggering social revolution by these technologies, the SBI Group will realize the revitalization of regional economies. Massive digital transformation happening behind the scenes during this crypto winter. People are not paying attention. As always, stay tuned. Many blessings to you all. And
thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Digital Assets Daily writes, HSBC praises XRP's DLT for cross-border payments, and Bank of America patent services. There's a lot of things, a lot of bullish signs happening for XRP and Ripple. Okay, the Paris Blockchain Week put this thing out. This is a quote from Monica Long, the president of Ripple. The past couple of years have been a real tipping point for institutional DeFi, where even the biggest of banks are embracing this technology as a future, and they have to adapt or die. Nice. Okay, moving on. Shout out to the Dark Horse. If you don't believe how early you are in this crypto space, this speech by Andrew Doge, CEO of Republic, spoken in front of Congress, really drives it home. We are the infrastructure layer. Let me play the video.
We are in the early stages of this technology, and I really want to provide some examples of that. It generally takes about 25 to 30 years for human beings to adopt a new data transfer technology. Radio was invented in 1890, but wasn't commercially available until the 1920s. TV was developed in the 1920s, but wasn't in homes until the 1950s. Email was invented in 1969, but most of you most likely didn't have an email address until 1997. There is one that I really want to focus on, and that's TCP/IP, which is the internet, for those that don't know. It was developed as a DARPA project in 1970, but it wasn't really commercially accepted until 1995 when it was rolled out with Windows 95. There's another important date, which is 1983. 1983 is when TCP/IP was accepted as the standard protocol for internet development, 13 years after it was created. Well, here we are, 13 years after Bitcoin was created, and we're just now starting to talk about standardization. This is not a coincidence. Adoption at this stage is not a technology problem, it's a human conditioning issue. Every 13-year-old in the United States has only existed in a world where Bitcoin has existed. 3 years from now, every 16-year-old will have only existed in a world where Bitcoin has existed. 16 years old is an important date because it's generally when someone becomes interested in becoming a developer. They are the adoption layer. We here in this room, we're the infrastructure layer. It's our responsibility to create an environment where every 13-year-old American has a framework upon which they can build the next world on. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
That is very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, moving on. Bitcoin News has this new London Stock Exchange group to develop a new digital market to offer TradFi assets on top of blockchain technology. And it just seems like the entire world is embracing this new technology, AI, blockchain, crypto, trying to make their country a much better place. And the United States of America seems to be doing the exact opposite. And to drive that point home, let me put this digital asset investor had this video with Chris Larsen. And let me play the video. Here we go.
Unfortunately, this administration made a really bad call.
At the city level or at the federal level?
At the federal level. They pretty much killed San Francisco from being what it was, the blockchain capital of the world. We owned it, and we don't anymore because the Biden administration, for whatever reason, decided they want to push this industry offshore. And so it's London, Singapore, Dubai that really are the global capitals of blockchain. That's unfortunate. Maybe our vacancy rate would be half of what it is here in San Francisco. It's 30%. It might have been 15% if we still were the global blockchain capital of the world. So that was a missed opportunity. It's really unfortunate. It hurt the city.
The latest with Ripple Labs action at the federal level is that you have objected to the SEC's request to appeal the original court ruling, which was positive for Ripple in the sense that it found the cryptocurrency XRP was not a security when it was sold to the public. Could you just explain what the latest is with that legal dispute?
Well, I think the bottom line is the SEC lost on everything that was important to them and important in regulation of the industry. The case still continues. There's appeal processes that everybody has the right to do. But we think that this is really groundbreaking. This is the law of the land. And it is actually quite good news, I think, again, I think the U.S. screwed up here on crypto and blockchain policy. This is the beginning now, through the courts, unfortunately, instead of the regulators, to get that clarity and get us back in the game.
It's kind of both happening in parallel. There's your situation with the SEC. Think about the applications pending for Bitcoin spot ETF. Gary Gensler and the SEC have both decisions to make on applications and fights that they are not willing to pick. How has that reflected on Gary Gensler, to your mind, as lead of that?
Well, you bring up a great point. You saw in the latest the challenge on the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF. Again, SEC lost, but not only that, the judge really admonished the SEC, really called them out in a way that you don't really see very often. I think it's just more proof that Gary Gensler's decision of sort of engaging this regulation by enforcement, rather than getting clear laws, he knows they're not clear. He just likes that lack of clarity so that he can go after anybody and make up the rules as he goes along through bullying. And that's not the American way. This should be a Congress. We should have clear rules from the legislatures, not through these sort of unelected, power-hungry, and really misplaced decision makers that you see in Gary Gensler. Unfortunately.
And that is 100% correct. I agree with that. And it's sad. It's sad for Americans to be dealing with this kind of corruption. There's no way around it. This is just government officials being corrupt and doing the bidding to the people who are lining their pockets. and it's sad to see. But hopefully we can get it straight and turn this thing around. Well, okay, fam, that's going to do it for today's video. If you found this video to be helpful, would you please smash a like and subscribe? I'd really appreciate it, and it doesn't cost you anything. Thank you much in advance. And the word of Snoop Dogg, keep your mind on your money, and your money on your mind. Peace out, fam.